Good evening, morning, or afternoon, depending on which coast or side of the pond you're on, and welcome to another special edition of Across the Pitch. Today, I'm Phil Kennedy, and I'm joined by Ross Davenport and a very, very special guest. We have Daryl Grove on the show today from the Total Soccer Show to give us his two worst signings by his favorite club, the Wolves, from 2010 through 2020. Welcome to the show, Daryl.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. And thank you for the very, very. I enjoyed the double very.
It is very, very special to have you on the show today. And I said I might get a little fanboy. Would I be able to get a hello and welcome by any chance?
Yeah, hello and welcome to
that is awesome. So I have Ross Davenport here with me, and we've done 7 teams so far. And Ross, you have the list of the 14 worst signings that we've gone over so far. Did you want to get that list out and go down there from there?
I do, Philip. First of all, obviously in alphabetical order. No bias here at all. In first place is AFC Bournemouth. We had Jordan Ibe and Lee Tomlin. In second, we had Man City with Wilfred Boney and Eliaquim Mangala. We had third, we had Burnley with Lucas Djukovic and Ben Gibson. Manchester United, we had Angel Di Maria and Bebe. For Spurs, we had Roberto Soldado and Vincent Janssen. Everton, we had Sandro Ramirez and Omar Nias. And for that horrible club that I'm sure we don't like to talk too much about, Aston Villa, Carlos Sanchez and Julian Lescott.
So we have hundreds of millions of wasted pounds. And how we've been kind of going through this, and it seems like it worked this way for you also, Daryl, is with the two players, there seems to be one guy, as soon as a question is asked, that's the guy that pops to mind. And then there's a second guy that you're maybe 99% sure about and have some honorable mentions. So whoever your first guy is, we put through to the first round proper. So who's your guy that we're going to put through to the first round proper straight through?
So it has to be Roger Johnson, signed in the summer of 2011.
And why would you think that he would be the player that would be the worst signing? Is it just the amount of money that they spent on him, the lack of play, all of the above?
Yeah, I mean, it's all of the above, but it's also what it represented at the time, right? So Wolves got promoted. They stayed up the season 2010-2011. They finished 17th. We just hung on by a point. And then in the summer of 2011, we started to spend some of that juicy Premier League money. And the big signing we got was Roger Johnson. We signed him from our rivals, Birmingham City, who'd been relegated. So it was almost like we'd raided Birmingham as they went down. And I still can't get a proper read on the transfer fee, but it was somewhere between £4 million and £6.5 million, which doesn't sound a lot now. And it surely doesn't sound that much even 10 years ago. But for Wolves, this was a lot of money, right? It's the first time we'd spent big money and we were going to spend this money and establish ourselves in the Premier League. So Roger Johnson is signed from our rivals. He is immediately made captain. And I think that was the big mistake. There are lots of rumors and reports and stories that this kind of split the dressing room because Wolves had stayed up with Carl Henry as captain and Johnson was bought and Mick McCarthy gave him the armband. And I think there might have been a bit of a split in the Wolves dressing room. And then all the form that he had showed with Birmingham, and they'd won the League Cup, by the way, the season before, even though they got relegated. And Johnson was one of the standouts in that final up against Van Persie and Arshavin. He'd had this wonderful game. And just none of that form was there for Wolves in that 2011-2012 season. Actually, just before recording with you guys, I just watched an interview of Johnson sort of explaining his season to Wolves fans. It's a thing called the Old Gold Club when they interview old players. And he says he doesn't know what happened. He'd never hit bad form in his life. And suddenly, every time he blocked a shot, it would deflect off of him and go in. And he has no explanation for his terrible form that season. But he got bad enough that apparently he asked Mick McCarthy to take him out of the team at one point because he said he just couldn't put a foot right. So that's the beginnings of the trouble with Roger Johnson.
Wow. I mean, I think that's something that we've heard with, that when you hear a top 6 club, you're hearing we spent $40 million on this guy and he played 2 games. When you're hearing teams like Wolves, or when we had Aston Villa yesterday, we had Cal Williams on for that. He's talking about the same thing you are, where You spent the money on that one guy for that one need that you needed to stay up, and that guy didn't deliver. And that's what hurts more than $4 million. It doesn't matter if it was $4 or $4 million, because it was that guy that you needed and he didn't deliver what he needed to. And then the Wolves aren't a club that had the funds to just go and throw at somebody else.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, spending this Premier League money for the first time was like we'd gone to a very expensive restaurant and we had something to choose off the menu, and we chose Roger Johnson, and it was just, we ordered the wrong dish, it turns out. There's a big story later in the year. The story that comes out is that Roger Johnson, club captain, turned up to training towards the end of the season drunk. This was the story that got put out. I've done some research into this, and apparently it's not what happened, really. He basically went out Sunday night and turned up Monday morning with a hangover. He turned up for training. So not really as bad as the story that was published seemed to be. But that was a big point where apparently Johnson felt that the club had turned against him because they didn't sort of defend him or try and make clear that he hadn't turned up to training drunk at all.
Well, the first mistake Wolves clearly made was not too many good footballers named Roger that I can think of. That was clearly the first mistake. But
isn't that Pele's first name? Isn't it Roger Pele?
I remember Roger Miller. He was a pretty decent player for Cameroon back in the day, although I think he was actually probably 20 years older than everybody actually thought he was. But from Roger Johnson, I seem to remember him trying to get in a fight with Wayne Hennessy at one point, his own goalkeeper, which not something you normally see. Although Wayne Hennessy, obviously a guy who's made a few dumb decisions here or there during his career. But as you mentioned, Daryl, it seems like the captaincy, was a big load on his shoulders. How has the Wolves captaincy been over the years, since then? And it's obviously something that you've got to be very careful with this year now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really settled these last few years with Connor Cody, right? It's been absolutely magnificent having a steady captain in Connor Cody. But weirdly, it felt with Carl Henry, like he was just the obvious captain. He was very vocal on the field. You could really see it. And so I'm really confused about why Roger Johnson was brought in and immediately given the captain's armband, especially because I kept hearing this thing that like, oh, he's a leader. He's got this style. He like talks to everybody. But that thing with Wayne Hennessy was because he was talking to him too much, right? So I did a bit of research into this. Apparently, Wayne Hennessy, apart from doing salutes, he also likes to punch the ball, right? When he comes out and a cross comes in, he loves to punch it instead of catching it, right? That's just what Wayne Hennessy does.
All that. Yeah.
And so probably because he's got the reach, right? So he can reach out, punch it clear instead of catching it. Roger Johnson just absolutely disagreed with this, and apparently this was a long-running thing where he would keep saying to Hennessy, "Catch it, don't punch it, catch it." So that's where it really came to a head in the game against, I want to say, Bolton. Is where that happened. And they ended up going sort of nose to nose and squaring up to each other. No punches were thrown or anything like that, but it's obviously a very, very bad look. But like from my perspective, it's just not that much. It's not effective leadership to keep telling a goalkeeper to do the opposite of what comes naturally to him, right? You've got to pick your battles about like when to disagree with what a player's doing.
Coming over from a city rival as well, obviously that's never easy on somebody, especially when they've just got relegated.
Yeah, I mean, but that was one of the things that had me excited about him, right? Because it was really like we'd raided Birmingham as they were relegated. So it just made this extra disappointing for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that any time that you're bringing in a player for his first year and making him captain immediately, that's a recipe for disaster. Because I think it takes time to build up that trust and leadership in the dressing room.
And then Wolves are relegated. Obviously, they're relegated this year. With Johnson staying, they're relegated again the following year. So after being relegated with Birmingham and then twice with Wolves, he's got, I don't know what the record is, but he's relegated 3 seasons in a row, which is obviously not a good look.
Well, I don't think that anybody's going to have any arguments on Johnson. Now, your second pick, you sent over to me, and he said it was 99%. Did you end up staying with your 99%, or did one of your honorable mentions?
It's Jamie O'Hara, who was signed the exact same time. It was the summer of 2011. It was spending the money, like thinking we were going to establish ourselves in the Premier League. And I felt like it was weird to pick 2 players from the exact same transfer window. But there's really haven't been that many bad decisions afterwards, because in the following years, Wolves didn't spend much money because they were getting relegated and mostly shedding players on the way down. And then once Fosun take over and you get the Nuno years, there aren't any really high profile bad signings, right? It's mostly been really smart loans with an option to buy. And it's really worked out in terms of like Raul Jimenez and guys like that. So I've got no complaints from the last few years. So this really seems like the one time when Wolves had some money, decided to spend it, and they spent incorrectly. So like I said, 4 to 6 million on Roger Johnson. And it seems like about £5 million to buy Jamie O'Hara from Tottenham. And Jamie O'Hara definitely did not work out. I was excited again at the time. Really talented player, got this beautiful left foot. He could like bend a cross in, loads of nice shots from distance. He actually scored a couple for Wolves early on, but then it was endless hernia and groin injuries. It was a lot of him being out and about. He said afterwards that he got a big contract and I took my foot off the gas and I was more interested in being the next David Beckham because he was dating Danny Lloyd, who apparently was Miss Great Britain at the time. So there was a lot of him living the celebrity lifestyle, being injured and not really performing for Wolves.
I think that has actually been a common theme with two guys from the same year. Ross, wasn't it Everton that both guys were from the 16-17 window?
It was, yeah. Teams just seem to go through these periods of poor signings, and these two are definitely up there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you're looking at is, like you said, teams just either they're hitting on all cylinders or they're hitting all misses. I think that both of the Spurs were from the same window as well, weren't they, Ross?
Yeah, it's almost like buses. You don't see one for a while, one bad signing for a while, and then they all come along at once.
Yeah, and I mean, and then that's like you said. I mean, that's when you see teams end up getting relegated, and those bad signings, they don't just hurt you for 1 year; they hurt you for multiple years. If you're not a Big Six team, they could just throw that money around.
Yeah, it's a little bit like if you watch the like Sunderland Till I Die documentary, when Sunderland go down to League One, like Wolves eventually did, you end up with a lot of these players that were signed in the Premier League era, and you just don't know what to do with them when you get to League One because they don't really want to be there because they still think of themselves as Premier League players. Their wages are still really aggressively high. And someone like Jamie O'Hara wasn't even fit enough to be able to play. So I think in the end, Wolves had to. It was a mutual agreement to terminate his contract in 2014. They just had to sort of get rid of him. Roger Johnson, they just sent on loan a couple of times and then eventually got rid of him as well. So neither of these guys played for Wolves in League One in the end. Yeah,
I mean, and I think to go to that Sunderland documentary that you're talking about, it's similar to the Jack Rodwell situation. Who's a guy that's already come up on the Man City and the Everton episode both. He's been a popular guy in this discussion too.
He's got a very good agent, I'll say that. He managed to get himself some nice salaries, right?
Yeah, there seems to be guys who just keep getting signed.
No, I was just going to ask Daryl, both of these guys come from the Kenny Jackett era. Obviously, Kenny wasn't horrible for you guys. He's done pretty well at Portsmouth. What are sort of Wolves fans' opinions about Mr. Jackett?
Well, these were both Mick McCarthy signings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Kenny Jackett took over after we went down to League One. So it's actually Kenny Jackett who came in and got rid of these guys, essentially.
Okay. But how was Kenny Jackett looked at as a Wolves manager? Because he got you guys back up to the Championship, and then obviously didn't make the next step. And then when the ownership came in, they shipped him off. Obviously, things have gone strength to strength since then.
It's weird, right? Like there was definitely a feeling at the time that he wasn't given a proper chance by Fosun after they took over. And it's worth remembering that the manager they chose to replace him was Walter Zenga, who did not do wonders. He's got one of those nomadic managerial careers where I think based on his reputation, maybe he has a good agent as well. He manages to be managing a club for a year or so, and then he's off again. I think Kenny Jackett deserves some time under Fosun, but it's really hard to argue that he should have been long-term being the coach because eventually we end up with Nuno, right? So he's hard done by in the short term, but I wouldn't change a thing right now because of how everything's played out.
Gotcha.
A lot of times, one thing that Callie Williams was bringing up yesterday with Carlos Sanchez and how he struggled so much with Aston Villa, and then West Ham ended up signing him anyway. And it's like you said, some of these guys have good agents, or Cal said that sometimes he feels like maybe West Ham just didn't quite do their research. Do you think that sometimes even at the top level, maybe some teams just didn't do their research and see, oh, okay, this guy played for Team X. He must be good enough to play for us too.
I mean, yeah, that definitely happens, right? And I would love to go back. I'm never going to have the time to do this, but I'd love to go back and try to see what was going on with Roger Johnson in that 2010 to 2011 season. Like, I know that his centre-back partner was Scott Dan, who was also really highly rated. And sometimes there's just a centre-back partnership clicks and it makes both of them look better than they are. And I wonder if there was something about that partnership that made them seem like players that were worth investing money in when maybe at least Roger Johnson wasn't.
That is exactly kind of what Cal was saying about Sanchez with the Colombian national team, is that the guys that he was playing with made up for his mistakes, and then when he got to Aston Villa, there was just not quite those same guys to make up for his mistakes when he was giving the ball away. But before we wrap up, who are some of your honorable mentions that were maybe in that 1% that you considered?
So the other major one I considered was Jelle Van Dam, who is, I believe, a Belgian fullback who Wolves signed the summer before in 2010 for 2.5 million, which was not massive money, obviously, but more than they had been paying for players. So Jelle Van Dam, I think he came in and only played like 4 games, and then I think just wasn't happy in the city of Wolverhampton, which it's not a particularly glamorous city. But I think there's a lot of footballers who maybe should visit the place they're gonna be joining before they move there.
Yeah, I think that's another theme that we've heard is that a lot of guys just get to a city and maybe it's not where they were used to living. Maybe especially guys that move over from Spain or South America, and then
we're talking about Angel Di Maria at Manchester United here, right?
No, Ross, who were we talking about that with the other day?
Trying to think along the list. Well, I mean, Carlos Sanchez, I think he was playing in the second division of Spain, or the team that's come up and down from the second division. He was one of them. We had a few. Mangala as well, another one.
Yeah, Mangala, that's what I was thinking of.
He had from the continent, from lesser teams, and just something that doesn't really tend to work too often.
And he's another guy where like you were saying with the center back combinations, where Mangala, maybe if Vincent Kompany had stayed healthy and paired up with him, it would have worked out. But he didn't have the skills to be the number one guy, if you will.
Yeah, listen, I watch Steve Cook play every week when he's healthy, alongside Nathan Ake, and everybody's been calling for Cook to play for England. But when he was playing alongside Simon Francis, it was another story. So yeah, I totally understand that point of view.
All right, well, Daryl, I think that we have 2 quality additions to our bracket. If you want to call it, it's maybe a wall of shame, if you will. But at the end of the day, all of these guys made a lot of money, so we can't feel too bad for them. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your 2 worst Wolves signings. Did you have any parting comments before we wrap up on this?
I want to end on a positive note and mention that Wolves' best signing in terms of value for money came in this period. The summer of 2010, they signed Matt Doherty from Bohemians in Ireland for £75,000. And that man is still playing in the Wolves first team in the Premier League and often looking like the best player on the field today.
I enjoyed having him in my fantasy team last year.
Yes. Scoring goals from the wing-back spot was excellent.
Yeah, wow, £75,000. That's incredible. And I'm glad that you decided to end on a positive note, because we are generally a positive show. This worst signings bracket is really the first negative thing, if you will, that we've ever done on the show. But we decided with everything that's going on in the world right now that people needed a little something to take 20 minutes a day and just kind of talk about football. And we kind of came up with this as a unique idea. And what we're going to do is, like I said, we're going to have 40 players that we come up with through the interviews. And then 32 will end up going into a bracket. We're going to be putting polls on Twitter. And ultimately, we're going to break it down and eventually have whoever is voted to be the number 1 worst signing in the Premier League in the last 10 years. And I think that you just put forth 2 solid candidates there.
Do you have anyone that you've heard so far who you feel like, oh, that's the guy, that's the favorite?
I think Bonnie has probably been that guy. What would you say, Ross?
Yeah, I would say Bonnie. I would say Angel Di Maria, just because of the high expectations that came in with him. And obviously we had Soldado and Janssen for Spurs. But I mean, you could go down the Spurs list of strikers and pick any of those, really. But yeah, those two are the two that stand out.
And then the
spot for Jordan Ibe as well. But
he's the new Raheem Sterling, I've heard.
Yeah, something like that. Where maybe he'll go somewhere and score against us like Raheem Sterling does.
My sleeper is Bebby. Where that guy played one game for Man United for £7 billion. I mean, I think that's a sleeper, but nobody's heard of him, so that might hurt him in the bracket. But I mean, one game for £7 million, that might be the worst value I've heard. Well, Daryl, thank you again for joining us, and you're going to be joining us here on a future episode where we're going to talk about all of the positive things about your Wolves and also some general football talk in general. We're going to talk about some of your favorite matches, favorite players, things like that. So we're looking forward to talking about that with you here in a future episode.
All right, sounds good. And thank you for having me on today. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Thank you.